What up, gang? It's episode 57. That's Heinz ketchup for you. And on this episode, I'm looking like a straight up lumberjack right now on the YouTube. So if you guys can watch on YouTube, if you guys aren't subscribed and all that, make sure you go into the description and find a link. It's going to all be there for you. And you can find out ways to support the podcast. We really appreciate you already being right here with us right now and being part of our community. So you're already doing something just by your ears being massaged right now by some waves of sound. You know what I mean? But more importantly, losing focus already, is Julian Frazier is going to be on today's episode. And this guy is an amazing human being. He is making some big waves in the SPL regional circuits. You're going to look out for him at NEPC this year for sure. He is only been training for maybe just over a year, but he's been crushing out these speed competitions, having a really meteoric rise to the top of the, at least the local and regional competition circuits. And I'm really excited to see how he's a former track and field athlete that's bringing that competitive and athletic edge in his background forward with him into our community. And also, and really what's cool about Julian is that he's studying and getting his PhD in counseling psychology, and he has, he does sports psychology, and he's really insightful on the dynamics and the nature and the psychology of sport and competition. And so we got to dive into all kinds of cool stuff on that. I've not competed in a while, but I really got to remember and relive and think about some of these parkour speed journeys that I've been on and how they relate to the things that he's doing and the similar parallels there. Not only that, but his dissertation, his thesis in his PhD is all about death and how death and the fear of it relates to the work that you do and the legacy that you strive to build and why you try to do it. And there's so many really insightful and cool things that we get into. And man, I don't even remember, honestly. Yeah, I'm going to have to listen to this one with you guys because I know there was some juiciness in there that I want to revisit. Thank you again, Julian, for coming on. It was a pleasure. Shout out to the was it Modus or Brewman? I think it was Brewman that put out the Vibes video, which I stole the song for this week's episode off of them. And shout out to Frosty, who's going to be on our next episode. So thank you guys for tuning in. Let's get into it without further ado. Let's go right now with the man, Julian Frazier.
I'm still like a little bit out of breath.
I know, me too, dude. I'm like
my cardiovascular health.
We just did 40 push-ups. You did about 50 with clapping ones at the end.
I think I did 40 and then I did 5 clapping just to finish it off.
That might as well have been. I did one giant drop-in push-up, and then I did the one barely got a clap off push-up at the end after 40.
I counted it.
It was good. My dad used to make me do a shitload of push-ups when I was growing up.
Huh.
Like, that was part of my punishment.
That was punishment for you.
That was punishment until it wasn't. I turned it around and flipped it on him. I was like, you know what? I like doing push-ups now. I'll do fucking extra ones, like you were saying.
That was punishment for you. So I had the privilege of doing push-ups when I was a kid.
Oh, nice. Well, I mean, yeah, eventually it felt like privilege. Then they started getting other punishment. Once he realized I was into the fun, once he realized I was down with the push-ups, he was like, it's not working anymore.
Yeah, I got to change it. I got to up the ante a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's get this thing popping off.
Absolutely.
Because, I always like to start a little groove in this mix.
Yeah. Set the mood, so to speak.
Well, let's just see what you think of this track. It's been as of late, a nice jam for me. Funky.
Smooth.
Groovy. Jazzy even. And this is that late Mac Miller with the Tiny Desk concert on NPR with Thundercat. You know what I'm saying?
Got a little that Motown sound.
Yeah.
That bass.
Make sure this isn't on.
Yeah. You can love it, you can leave it. Saying nothing without it. Yeah. Don't let them keep you down. What if I don't need it? But there's something about it. Yeah.
That just freaks me out.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want another minute with it. Fuck a little, what's the use? Yeah. Never superficial,
Oh yeah. All right. We'll let that first verse. That's all you need. That was plenty.
That was good.
You like that? I'm a huge fan of it as well.
Yeah, it's a good get your feet wet a little bit. Makes you want to go back for a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, let's just get in there. Then.
Oh no. I mean, you come back to it. It's like, it's a little tease. That's what it is.
Yeah.
There you go. I like that.
Yeah, man. Well, thanks for coming on.
I'm glad
really
to be
appreciate
here.
you being here.
It's my pleasure, really.
It's been a little bit of a time coming. Like, I think we talked about doing this, like, I don't know, since like we first met. Even maybe I was like, oh, I have a podcast, and you're like, actually, I listened to it, and I was like, no shit.
Yeah.
Well, you should come on because you have a lot to say. I feel like, or you're at least more to say than I do, because I'm usually talking about dicks on here. I just wrapped up an episode with Vinny,
Right.
and it's often where I end up.
Man, how would you feel about making this like a dick-free interview? What?
Well, I already blew it, didn't I?
I mean, no, don't worry.
From here on forward.
We can set some boundaries now. And
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, and I think that's exactly what we'll do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's skip that whole domain.
All right. I mean, challenge accepted.
All right. I'm with it.
So
unless it feels authentic.
Unless it feels authentic.
Unless there's a real reason to go there.
Something comes up. Something from
a real
Floyd.
reason to go. Yeah.
And you got to bring it up. He smoked a lot of cigarettes, and the cigars have a very particular shape. So
yeah, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, is what they said, right?
I'm so glad you knew that quote. I'm so glad.
Cool, man. Well, for those who don't know, let me give you a little bit of an introduction here, because I think you deserve one. And
appreciate
there's basically, here's how I know you. He's like, you started competing at some of the various competitions, being held here in Colorado, parkour speed competitions. Mm-hmm. You come from a track and field athletic background. Yep. And you're also studying to become get your PhD in, forgive me, some kind of type of psychology.
Yeah, counseling psychology. They're all the same. They just kind of put them in different schools.
Okay. And
semantic reasons.
Let me just check that out of our ears so we can focus. And you've been crushing these challenges, and you kind of came out of the woodwork. And I think that was one of the coolest things about just seeing you, is you reminded me in some ways of my journey through parkour and speed and competition, because I came into the game, and I was telling you this earlier, kind of late. Like, I started training actually at about 21 years old, and I was like basically about to finish college, and I felt like I was more grown for sure than a lot of the people that I now am like good friends with that were in this community. And then I ran into a really severe injury my first year of training. So when I came back and I still wanted to do it, I was like, all right, I'm committed. And I felt like I had a sense of, I sensed the same kind of like purpose to what you're doing in the sport. That's all I could say. Like I feel like you're here to play around and have fun and enjoy the community, but also for other reasons. Is that accurate?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's pretty accurate. It's weird because, I mean, you notice, you talk about the age difference, and I've always feel like I've been a late bloomer. I've always felt like I've been late or late to almost every game that I've been to. And when you compete in sports, like structure otherwise, from a very young age. So I remember my first sport was soccer, and then moved into track, but it almost becomes a part of your DNA, like your epigenetics. Like it activates something in you and the way that your brain is structured, that you don't just stop. So you go from track and field. I ran the 400 for 5 years at the University of Tulsa. It was like, okay, what's next? Like, what's the next thing? Because I can't just stop. There's an entire part of myself that I would have to put on the bench, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I was like, when I came out to Denver, I moved out here, I was like, okay, I got to try something. It's got to be like parkour or skiing or Muay Thai. I got to try something. And the first thing I tried was parkour. And I had an intro class with Austin Lutz, who was himself a track and field athlete. Yeah. So, we kind of spoke the same language, and he made, parkour very relatable to me. And then when I found out that there were speed competitions, it was game over.
Yeah, exactly, man. That's awesome. Yeah. And what drew you to parkour initially, I guess? Was it just Muay Thai? That all just seemed interesting enough?
Right. I don't think I could do something that was traditional or mainstream. I don't think I could pick up a recreational sport. And when I say recreational, I mean go from playing soccer at a high level. It's like, okay, I'm just going to play on the weekend warrior team. Yeah. I had to find something that would push myself And it felt like it had to be something a little more extreme, a little bit out of the box, a little bit outside of, my comfort zone. We were talking about a little bit about how important that was. And it just happened to be that I moved to a place with a great community to do that.
You lucked out. I was born here, so I really lucked out. The competitions, let's get into that a little bit, because that's a fascinating territory for me and obviously for you. Yeah. And I guess just to start, what's your experience been like competing in parkour competitions? What's your assessment? You've only been, I don't know how long you've considered yourself training and being participating in this, but I would consider you someone who's making waves for how long you've spent in the sport. Yeah. You're kind of like, oh, out of nowhere, there's there's this new person in town crushing these challenges out. Right.
Well, I definitely appreciate that. I think participating is a good word. I don't know if I would consider myself a parkour athlete. Mm-hmm. I think I'm an athlete that does parkour. Because you see cats out here like Jared Nahulu, who came out of the womb doing parkour and he does these things that are absolutely mind-boggling to me, and I am humbled and reminded so often that my gateway, my entry to parkour was that I was already strong and fast from a decade plus of organized sport of soccer and track and field. So it was a little bit easier for me to get into that scene, and having a competitive background, I was kind of familiar with what that space felt like. Yeah. What it felt like to compete. And then after that, it's been a journey of trying to catch up, the skills, the technique, all of the experience, to the environment that I'm putting myself in.
I feel that big time, because that's partly why I was able to do, some of the things I was able to do in competition was I just felt like maybe, I had some background in competition as well, and whatever. But mostly it was just I wasn't necessarily as skilled. I was able to use just a little extra focus or drive to want these things and to push myself further than, I think that when people first got into parkour, it's generation by generation, the very first practitioners obviously are getting in for pure love of just play. And that's basically all it was. And then as it develops more and more, there's different avenues that develop, and people that gravitate towards those avenues, it attracts different people. I'm a competitive person as well. So I got attracted into the competitive side of parkour in the same way. And because I was competing against people that didn't necessarily get into parkour for any of that, and I had kind of a hybrid, even though I wasn't as skilled, I always saw myself, I'm like, oh God, I don't feel like I should be competing against these guys. I'm like, I can't believe I'm doing as well as I am, because I'm sloppy a little bit, but I'm just I just have aggression for it.
Yep. I feel that. That's something. I went to the Apex International last year, and you compete against people like Joseph Henderson, who are absolute technicians, doing crazy things, jumping as far if not further than I have, and I'm like, how is this kid out here doing these massive crazy things? And I feel like I'm stronger and faster, but somehow he can tap into something that I can't, and you get that imposter syndrome where you're man, there's part of me that feels like I don't belong here yet. There's part of me that feels like I'm not ready for this. And that definitely gets in your head in terms of the competition piece, but that's part of the growth and development process, is feeling like one day I will come to this stage and feel like I belong here with these people.
And that's how you kind of work through it. That's kind of how I did it. In a way, that's partly, I guess, what your training can be about. Right. It's just not necessarily comparing yourself to other people, but just knowing that you're actually at the level that you could be. Right.
And you say not necessarily comparing yourself to other people, absolutely comparing yourself to other people. Yeah. Maybe not in a way that is pessimistic or that tears myself down, but being really honest with myself in terms of where I stand compared to someone like that.
Yeah, it's a sensitive, people get a little too sensitive about it, including myself. And I know what you mean.
I'll be unapologetic about those things. We're members of a social species. We can't help but compare ourselves to one another.
Yeah, it's nonsense to think that you don't.
Right. And to then compare yourself to someone, it's not the comparison itself, it's the thought that follows that. Is the comparison, say, let me see how I stack up against this person, and then to appraise that there's something wrong with me. Exactly. That's the negative part. It's the thought that follows the comparison.
That's 100%. That's a huge, healthy distinction to make. because it's not that I didn't compare myself. I'm like, oh, this is what's possible.
Right.
Like you see somebody else. There's a other famous quote, like, what one man can do, another man can do. And that's not necessarily true, but like, but it's true enough that it's important. You get inspired off of that. And like knowing that, you can use that energy to help believe in yourself more. And like, and then the healthy comparison, I guess, is to make against yourself. And that one you might actually be able to engage with, like, do you feel bad about it? Because that one, it makes sense to, in some ways, like if you're not better than you used to be, or in a way that's important to you, it can guide you back on the path of development again.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's hard because people think of the path of development as being linear, as being straight. And even I have to constantly remind myself that sometimes you have to take a step back to take a step forward. One step back, 2 steps forward kind of thing. So if I'm comparing myself today as I was yesterday, there might be some things that I'm not as sharp at, but it's all part of that process, that there is kind of an ebb and flow. There's kind of a process where, man, I thought I had that thing and it turns out I suck. And let's get back to go back to the drawing board, so to speak. But I think that there are healthy ways of using those things because they are things that are built into what it means to be human. You can't take comparison out of the game without trying to isolate yourself entirely. So I don't know. People have different opinions about competition and about comparison. And I feel as though those aren't going to be things that disappear from my life. So I might as well have the healthiest relationship with them that I can.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that? Like, what would you say to the person who's like, I'm not, I'm against parkour competition. That there's a voice out there that is against competition happening in parkour.
Right.
And regardless, and I want to take this outside of FIG and all that bullshit, because obviously like that carries a whole other thing with it. But
what would I say to them, or what would I be thinking about?
Thinking. Give me that thought.
Because if someone said that, I'd probably let them be where they're at with that. I mean, that's their opinion. It's not my job to go around
100%
imposing myself on other people. But I don't know. There's part of me that feels as though that's a cop-out in some ways, to say that there isn't some sort of competition. Because even if it's a jam or something like that, there's still some element of competition happening. And I think it's more against the idea of competition as there being winners and losers, and there's people on a podium and people getting prize money and the political side of things. But I think to say, oh, what I'm doing is not important enough to be a competition, to be organized. It's not important enough. It's just play. It's no big deal. Who cares who wins, who lost? What you're doing is you are diluting or downgrading the importance of the thing that you're doing. So why are you spending all your time and energy doing this thing, but you're not willing to value it? Or when someone challenges you to value it, you go, oh no, you have to step away, shy away, and say, no, this is just for fun. It doesn't matter. Well, it does matter, because you were putting a lot of time and energy into it, my friend.
Your life is about it,
right?
In so many ways.
Yeah.
And perhaps the distinction that they'd like to draw, and maybe, there's fewer people out there that actually are against it, I think, than even it seems like,
right?
That are actually opposed to it. And what I also agree with you is, like, there's not only you diluting it and downplaying its importance, but you're trying to control something that's not yours. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, it's not yours to begin with. Do whatever you want to do with it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't take away from the fact that other people can use it the way they want to use it.
Absolutely.
And I think there's a difference between, like, people who see themselves as, I've been talking recently about this with other just friend people in my life about artists and athletes. And some people see it more as a martial art or kind of an art form, and they don't want to cheapen the art form.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that makes sense to me, but it doesn't make sense that they can't live independently of each other.
Yeah.
That's the distance.
Yeah. It's kind of an all or nothing kind of take on things, because I feel like once you reach a certain level of mastery in anything, that it can become an art form, that you recognize the art in anything like, so track and field is, for all intents and purposes, like just running. And anyone watching someone run fast is like, oh, there's a fast person. But if I watch someone run fast, I'm looking at their form, I'm looking at their knee drive, their arms. It's like, man, they run beautifully.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly. And that's what annoys me too. It's like, if you don't understand the art of athleticism, then you don't actually understand it enough. in some ways, or you could understand it better.
Yeah. So, but
Maybe
that's what I'm thinking. That's what's going through my mind is don't cheapen the thing that you do, because even if you call parkour just the art of movement or a passive martial art, there's still ways that you can find it meaningful and important. You can call that competition or not. Don't cheapen what you do, or devalue it. So that's what's going on in my mind. I'm not going to say that because I'm trying to respect where that person's at, and it might not be the time or place. But
sure, and you feel like again, if you're feeling any of that imposter syndrome stuff, it's like you're new to this community in some ways, and like you're testing the waters out. I mean, I'm curious to see, because as someone who's a late bloomer too, there was a lot has changed even since when I got in.
Right.
When I got in, there was so much underdeveloped compared to now that it was like super fun building it out. Now there's more to participate and engage with. And I guess what do you think of the culture and the community in terms of like where it's headed, and what do you like about it?
That's actually been one of the things that has been most fun, is learning about the culture and learning about the history, and even it's like very recent stuff, because I think I kind of started pursuing parkour more competitively or more seriously as like you and your contemporaries are kind of like on your way out. So when I'd start hearing certain names come up in conversation, the Dylan Bakers, the Brandon Douglases, I'm like, okay, who are these people?
We're nobody.
Let me go figure this out. Well, you say that, but you're part of a legacy, right? That there was a legacy of the identity of parkour. And there's that whole like infamous series that they had just started, on YouTube,
with NAPC.
And then tracing it back and saying, okay, where do I fit into this picture, this lineage? And you see that it happens with a lot of new sports. It happens with, snowboarding, skiing. It happens with skateboarding. That it kind of transitions through this adolescent phase. And I feel like parkour might be in that kind of adolescent phase, where it's figuring out its identity. And,
big time.
And then once it kind of once the dust settles a little bit, then it will be easier for the world to recognize parkour for what it really is, instead of maybe some naive notions of it being a daredevil sport and a bunch of reckless kids and delinquents jumping on roofs.
Which, I mean, and what do you, because that's fascinating to me. That's actually really a weird and like kind of a touchy thing in a way, but because, part of me is like, I don't want to alienate or try to disparage the thing that I love. Right. But I do feel that there is that adolescence in what we do. Right. And I perpetuated it, part of, and part of what like I was doing when I was building Merm and stuff was, was really having a lot of fun. And even with this podcast, like I take it to levels where I like to be sometimes serious, but often very tongue in cheek or very ridiculous, and for me, I like to see the completeness of something. I like to see it build out in every way, in every domain. I don't think it has to be boxed in. And I think that's one of the messages I'm trying to carry forward in some ways, is like, that's why, just like we evolved as from one phase to the next, like parkour evolves, but also it's going to still leave behind the adolescence. Right. That stuff doesn't necessarily go away. Maybe it does, but I don't think that, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? I guess do you think that we're actually going to get to a place where there's not adolescents jumping off of roofs and like doing borderline shit, where it's like, are you, and is that, I don't even see that as necessarily a negative thing. Sure. Right. It's like, this is like a self-discovery phase of life, is when you're right. I think it's, when I kind of use the term adolescence as like that transition to adulthood in some ways, I think it's that exploration of identity. It's that coming into one's own maturity, right? Because in the minds of a lot of folks, they think of parkour, and the first thing is hardcore parkour, and they think of Office episodes, right? And that to me is, but if I talk about soccer or basketball or football or one of these other sports that are more mainstream, it creates a picture in someone's head of a mature sport with rules, with regular structure. It makes sense to them, and so it's a process of maturity. And when I say adolescence, I don't mean that the humor can't always be there, that the playfulness, that the tongue in cheek can't always be there, that those can't be elements of what it means for parkour to be mature. But I think it's also really smart
to acknowledge, we're not there yet. Like there's plenty of room to grow. And in some ways that is optimistic. That's hopeful to say that we do have so much room to grow as a community, as a sport, as whatever you want to call it.
100%. And there needs to be something there for people that do feel like they're growing up and growing out of the adolescence, like I just don't feel the same pull to watch some of the things that I would watch when I was younger.
Right.
Definitely even like 5 years ago, definitely when I was like 14 or 13. And I'm not going to be hating on any of that, but I'm not compelled to make content like that or for that audience or engage with those kinds of things. It's so, I feel your thing. I don't know why there's resistance sometimes in the community to be like football, to be like soccer, to be like one of these mainstream things. I think it's like you said, it's a cop out to think that because those things, because the layperson doesn't think of the beauty of the game of football or the beauty, the soul of soccer. Right. No one can think of that. No one thinks of that. Like we get hardcore parkour. So how is that any better? How is that any better? Exactly the layperson doesn't think of like the soul of parkour just because we're not official. Right. Yeah. They think of some bullshit, the most recent like meme of it. Right. And
those are things that come with time. It's just a matter of time.
It takes the people in the sport to grow up, grow it out, build everything out.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's fun that no matter what it is, you see that push and pull. There's always a conservative side that wants to maintain the spirit and maintain what it is, and to say in some ways that we've arrived, and I would rather parkour stay exactly the way that it is now forever. And then there's always the more liberal argument that says that where we're at now is good, but it can be better, it can be greater, it could be something else, it can branch out, like you were saying before. And there's that push and pull with anything, and I think that's actually kind of healthy. That's kind of normal. It keeps the side from the conservative side from keeping things too static. And it keeps the liberal side from running off in crazy directions.
Crashing into a wall.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's huge. I think it's a huge tale of our times right now. Yeah. That relates to like everything that's happening in our nation and like across the world. Yeah.
And that's not a new story. That's a story that's repeated itself over and over again in human history. So it's
100%.
We're a product of our.
How do you? I mean, what's your take on like how we balance those things when they get out of whack? And do you feel like we're on either side of too conservative or too chaotic in the?
I think. I mean, I mentioned like that ebb and flow. That there's like a pendulum that swings back and forth. Yeah. And that humanity has its way of course correcting. So things will start swinging towards more of a liberal, I guess if that's what you want to put it, maybe not politically liberal, but like a more expressive and a more outdoor, more open concept.
Free love.
Yeah. And then they'll say, those are great ideas. Also, we might be losing something here. And then the pendulum will swing back towards a more conservative, more static, a more structured, grounded idea. And the pendulum just swings back and forth. So you saw that in the elections, again, not to get political, but Donald Trump.
Get political, man.
Yeah. And I don't want to because I'm not an expert on it. But
neither am I.
It's just social commentary that you saw Obama being the pendulum swing in one direction and then Trump being that pendulum swing back. Yeah. And that's just natural for it to swing back and forth like that. It is correcting and then overcorrecting and then correcting and then overcorrecting and that is kind of the ebb and flow of that humanity's always followed.
I felt like we overcorrected with Trump. Sorry, gang.
Well, we'll see what the next overcorrection will look like.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how this develops.
Yeah.
What is your dissertation going to be about? I wanted to dive into that a little bit.
Yeah.
We were talking about this and like I was telling you how I know it relates. So let me just like open that up first because you're getting your PhD and you have a thesis or a dissertation that you have to defend.
Yep.
And I'd love to hear like what that thesis is.
Sure. And this is probably good practice for my oral defense.
Yeah, here we go.
So in about a month, I will defend my dissertation. It is titled Working for a Living. And it's how our awareness of death and our ability to die influences our work and career decisions. And it's been about a year and a half of working on this, everything from, doing the research from scratch to, getting a sample and running an experiment and then writing it all up. And it's just like part of the process of getting your PhD is to complete a dissertation and defend it. So I'll defend that in March, and then I have a year of residency, and then I am done with school, hopefully forever.
How has the death affected your decisions, I guess, would be the first question that comes to mind. Or like, what do you think?
How has death affected my decisions?
Your work that you're working for a living decisions. Is it like,
man, I think for me, it's affected me by wanting to make the most meaning out of work as possible. Humans have always had to work. Like that's a human universal.
Yeah.
Go prehistoric, like our ancestors had to work. It was hunting and gathering, it was whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Our ancestors have not always had jobs.
Yeah.
That is a fairly recent thing.
Yeah.
That we've invented. Is the employment system, is the job system, and it's part of a. So for me, it's saying, okay, how do I take work and make it as meaningful as possible? So for my ancestors, hunting and gathering was very meaningful, because if they didn't hunt, they didn't gather, then they would die. That was the consequence for not working. Now you can not work and you find a way to get by. You can get by. You can get by without working, right?
Yeah.
Because it's become more complex. It's become a proxy of itself. So for me, I want my work to be meaningful, to contribute to humanity potentially in a way that my work outlives me. That even though I die, whatever I did in my lifetime is somehow still helping generations of humans after me. It's funny that so many of the existentialists out there talk about death, and they talk about the absurdity of life, given that we're all going to die. But they're all really famous, and they're all in some ways immortalized by their work and by the fact that we're continuing to have the conversations that they started. So that even though there's a bunch of dead white guys who were talked about death. And
who are these dead white guys?
Ironically, existentialists.
Yeah.
Most of them are European, starting with Soren Kierkegaard. He's kind of what they say is the father of existentialism.
Okay.
Friedrich Nietzsche is probably, he's lumped into the existentialist. He probably would not call himself an existentialist, but he's in there. Albert Camus, one of his most famous quotes is, the only real philosophical problem is whether or not to commit suicide. And that's that's how he started a book. Right?
Yeah.
So you can only imagine where that goes from there.
Yeah.
Martin Heidegger was up there. And then you have guys like Irvin Yalom.
Is there any dead black guys? Like,
I wish that there were more.
Is that part of what you're driven by in some ways? Do you think, or I don't know? Yes,
absolutely. Yeah. I look at all the legacy of some of these, like, for this philosophical thought, and I'm like, man, it'll be really cool to like come up with a new idea, like to come up with an idea and flush it out that people haven't thought of in a way that people are like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Let's keep talking about this.
Yeah.
And in some ways to be in the history books as like the first black existentialist, right? I mean, there's like Afrocentric existentialism, which kind of looks at, the role that colonialism and dominance hierarchies played in slavery and those sorts of things. But I'm thinking more broadly in terms of how I want to approach some of those things myself.
For sure. I think that's interesting because do you feel like what's the drive there? Is it like, if I had a dead black dude to look up to, maybe it would make me feel more empowered to do these things.
Absolutely.
And this has always been this is a hot and touchy subject, like for me to dance nearby, you know what I mean? Like, because
let's dance, my friend.
Let's dance. Because I feel like we want the same things, like, from both sides of the aisle. And then sometimes people feel silly thoughts, basically, where they feel like someone's against them. If, I don't know, actually. I don't really know where I was going to go with that. Basically, that, like, if you're, I don't identify as like the kind of person who would be against it. So it's kind of hard for me to even make the argument. But I know that some people feel uncomfortable with I don't know, maybe I don't. The idea that people would want to like, oh, you want to be like, why do you have to be black? Why does he have to be? Why can't you be inspired by the white guy as much? Yeah. And I guess like it'd be interesting to hear you explain.
Well, first of all, I have been inspired by a whole heck of a lot of white guys, because those are the ones who started the conversations, and then they passed that conversation from one generation to the next. So part of my education and a large part of my self-education, me educating myself, is just learning from people regardless of their race, ethnicity, their background. 100%. Right. So I have been inspired by a whole heck of a lot of white guys.
Yeah.
I think one thing that happens when we speak the same language, especially, is we take for granted that even though we're both speaking English, that we're saying the same things. That even though we're using the same words, that they're coming from the same perspective. So when I get the dead white bearded guy perspective, it's one perspective. It's one language. It's one dialect. It might still be English, but it's only one perspective. When you start to broaden, the types of people that you are getting your perspectives from, different cultures, different religions, different socioeconomic statuses, different, gender, sexual orientations. What you're doing is you might be still speaking English, but you are translating between these different groups as different perspectives. So when I talk about existentialism or some big lofty idea, right? I am coming at it from a completely different perspective. And if we can meet in the middle, then what we've done is we've translated we've connected, right? So what I would like to see, and what would be awesome to be a part of, even if that were a part of the legacy, is I would love to learn more from a woman philosopher, philosophy from women specifically.
Yeah,
I would love to learn more from,
because it's just not in the conversation yet enough, really. Like, or it takes up almost no fraction of the pie,
right? And I would love to learn from other folks of color. I would love to learn from people of religions I haven't heard of before, because until I've done that, I will forever have blind spots. There might be something in someone else's idea of the same philosophy, that the way that they say it, the way that they can convey it to me, the way that we can connect, somehow it opens up a completely different chapter that I didn't even know existed yet. And those are the things that I look for. It's sometimes the unknown unknowns, right? You don't know what you're looking for, but you find it, and you find it in the perspectives of people.
Unlike yourself. 100%. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think I kind of see what I think people get defensive about, like unnecessarily, is that they think that because you seek that out, because you want to be challenged by different perspectives, and because, I similarly feel the same way. I think I do, at least. I want to like be challenged and experience the whole conversation, because the whole conversation includes all these people.
Right.
It doesn't include just people like me. That they feel like they're obligated to seek it out the same thing. And I don't think anyone's really saying that. Like, go do you. If you want to close your box and close your mind, no one's really going to like make you do it, I guess. But you really shouldn't be standing in the way. I don't know if that resonates.
It's hard because as soon as you start talking about things like race, which is, it is controversial nowadays, and has been for decades and maybe centuries.
Yeah.
Millennia?
Hey, I don't know. I forget like how the evolutionary timeline goes, but technically maybe we were all one color at one time, right? And then we went north and lost our pigment, and now
I read something
different.
As a side, I read something that was like you were only ever like 17th cousins with the person you were least related with, based off of like genetic heritage or something. So everyone's your cousin. That's not weird. I think anytime that you try to polarize things into an us and them category, you make things about black or white or differences of religion, difference of belief, or any kind of difference. A lot of people's first instinct is to create that us, them, me, other division, dichotomy. And what closes the box is the defensiveness that does come up from pointing out differences, from making them clear. There's a very strong like and human thing about, wanting, getting defensive, about wanting to defend what is oneself. So if you bring that conversation to the wrong place or to the wrong time, you're going to catch someone where they're not ready to hear what you have to say. And
Yeah, I feel you.
that if you create defensiveness, whether you mean to or not, that it's going to close someone up. It's going to close off their box.
So then I guess the question becomes like, how do we build these connections and build these bridges and share and point out the similarities and get people to understand that? And how do we know when they're ready to receive these messages, or how do I know? Or does anyone know?
Right. Very slowly.
Clearly, since we've gone back millennia.
There's no silver bullet. Excuse me.
Of course.
There's no silver bullet. We just do it through connections. And you were taking it back to, once upon a time we were all the same color. Yeah. Humanity has a history of spreading around the world.
Yeah.
And in spreading around the world and separating in tribes and dividing, we came to be the predominant force of the earth.
Yeah.
Now we're in a position where there's nowhere else to explore outward. We have to explore in. We have to explore within humanity. And you see with the globalization, folks are able to move from point A to point B much easier. I can get on a plane and go to Japan and be there in 20 hours. And that's something that's never been possible in human history before. So we had a phase of division. And again, that's part of that ebb and flow. And I personally believe that now that we've spread across the world in such a way that we'll also come back to some form of uniformity where we can share those things more openly, honestly. But it took us a really long time to spread around the world.
It's going to take a long time. They say, what is it, when you break up with somebody, it's like time and a half of the relationship that it takes you to get over it or something.
Yeah.
Or at least half time. I forget what it was.
And that takes it back to death, because when you break up with someone, and this might be aside, you're really losing a part of yourself.
Yeah, 100%.
You're losing a person, but you're losing the person that you were with them. And that's what you have to mourn. But so
that's
everything
wild.
from
I've had to mourn
dissertation.
parkour. I've had to mourn the former athletic feats of a younger, more, whatever, the people that, when you heard about the Brandon Douglases of the parkour world, like that person was mourned.
Yeah.
Because that is not somebody that I could maintain or sustain anymore.
How do you feel you are in that process? Have you?
I feel like I've made my peace with so much of it that I don't, I still want to do things in that same domain, but it's different. It's not coming from a place of challenging myself for I don't need to know if I can go further anymore in that domain. I like to express myself in that domain still.
Yeah. And
for a while it was about seeing how far I could take it. And now if I want to take it further, it's not because I feel it's a more of an intrinsic motivation where I'm like, that is something I want to do.
Yeah.
Whereas before it was like, I'm looking for the thing that's going to push me in this domain. I took that motivation and I brought it, into other places because I realized that motivation for me is about that personal growth and about hearing more and gaining more perspective, doing different things. And I wasn't gaining more perspective doing the same kinds of challenges and stuff that I was already really good at. And also my body was breaking down. If I could have kept challenging myself in that domain, I would have, but it was destroying my body.
So do you feel like you answered the question as to how far you could push it then?
Yeah, I pushed it right up to the edge of death as far as I was concerned. And I was telling you, some of the things I've done, well, one of the most iconic things for me that I did was I climbed up this parking garage. And that specific challenge, I think, was in a way where I tried to push myself to the absolute limit mentally. And for whatever reason, it was the challenge that made me work the hardest. I spent almost a year figuring out how to go up it and knowing and trusting myself over time to want to do it without, any kind of safety net. and in a way that it felt comfortable for me to do. But I felt like it was a real like rite of passage I had set for myself. Like no one really knew about it but me, but I was like, I have to do this.
Right.
I can't trust myself with my own life unless I put my life on the line.
Interesting.
Is what kind of the way I thought of it, you know?
Yeah.
And then once it was complete, I realized that I didn't necessarily, I was very glad that I did it the way it went down and everything, but I realized that I don't need to do that again. Yeah. I don't need to put my life over a 40-story drop to know, or like a 4-story drop to feel that feeling, to trust myself. But I've still done things that people might think, oh, well, you did that thing after though. And it's like, yeah, but then there was a different motivation. Then it was like, I just was having fun with it now. I was like, oh, I can do this. It wasn't about, I already know I can trust myself in that domain now. Yeah. That was when I knew I could do it. I was like, oh, if I really want to, I can take it to the point where I'm like, I'll try something that I could die doing, but I know I won't.
Yeah. So I think one of my questions following that is, do you feel as though you overcame death by overcoming this challenge?
I felt like I thought I would, but I didn't.
Yep.
Yeah. I felt like that's like the perspective I got after. I was like, oh, it doesn't change anything. Yep. I was like, oh, nope, nothing happened really. Nothing really happened. I did the thing that I thought was going to make me change and feel like I overcame my death. And then I realized, nope, that's not really how it works.
You mean if I climb 4 stories, I don't become immortal? What's that about?
No, yeah, that was like, it was some strange kind of like, because like you said, the hunter-gathering, like we used to have to work. So now we don't have to. So we have to invent our own challenge. Right. We have to invent our own path forward and to see what we're made of. And that was like something I came up with.
Yeah, that was one of the ways that you were coping with, what we call mortality salience or death anxiety from the frame of terror management theory, TMT. So
please explain, or if there's, if you can, I don't know, for the layman here.
I mean, try to make it as brief as possible. It comes from the work of a man by the name of Ernest Becker. Is one of his Pulitzer Prize winning books was the Denial of Death, and he wrote that pretty much all that humanity is doing is trying to find ways to cope with the fact that we die. That we are on the planet the only species that can understand abstractly that we die. We're not the only species that mourns or that understands loss, but we are the only ones that can
see it coming,
visualize in our mind this thing called death. And then we have to cope with that. That's something we have to cope with, because it's not like a tiger, which I can fight, or a threat that I can run from, because there's no fighting or flighting from death. So all of our reptilian tools for dealing with death, or for dealing with threat, does not work with death.
What about those mammalian tools? Any there?
There are some there. There are some tools in our frontal lobes that we use in some.
And then we have the primate tools, and then we have the human. Is there like a third, fourth, fifth layer on that?
There's at least 4 layers that I can think of off the top of my head. But so that everything you're doing, from this podcast to the job that you work to your legacy, you're trying to find ways of coping with the fact that you're going to die. One way that we do that is we try to symbolically transcend death, right? So I want to create something that's going to outlive me, because creating a legacy is one way that I can continue to live, even when I am biologically no longer alive. And that's kind of where we come up with religions and cultures and monuments and all these governments and systems that we've created, because they're all this collective attempt for us all to transcend this reality of our own death. And it gets pretty interesting, the ways that it can influence a person's decisions, even mostly subconsciously, that it's most studied. And
what do you think that is? Is that something that's programmed into us? Because if it wasn't, then maybe there'd be more of us that would commit suicide, and answered yes to that the first stage question or whatever. Just like, fuck it, not worth it, is it?
Right.
Like, do you think it's something that is a part of the fabric of carbon life or something that we have to, like, because things grow, like plants grow, everything kind of evolves and changes. And so sometimes I think it's like, even as we come and we spread across the earth and now we're going inward and finding our humanity again in some ways, maybe we'll even dig deeper beyond that. We'll start to have to, you know, we're seeing it in some ways. People are saying like, oh, we're connecting with plants and stuff. And the forests are calling us with mushrooms and psychedelics and DMT. And they're trying to bring consciousness even back further into a, you know, I'm just curious, like what you think of that? Like, is it something that's, why do we need to transcend our own death?
So
is it the only answer to not committing suicide?
So if I was going to go back to, you know, Albert Camus' quote, and how he went about answering that is that our answer should be some sort of rebellion against this thing, that there is this absurdity of life in the face of death, but that rebellion is the only like good answer. That
fuck you.
Right.
Oh, you're gonna kill me?
Right.
Oh yeah. Well, check this out. See if I'm dead after I do that.
All this awesome stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then that is part of the human condition that we have to live with. So I mean, it goes back to very basic fight or flight, right? Anytime there's a threat that you perceive, you're gonna want to fight it or flight it, or you freeze, which is another, you know, branch of that. But and death is one of those threats that we have initially a fight or flight response to, a very subtle one, but it polarizes us and it pushes us in extremes. And I think that is actually probably one of the psychological drivers that, you know, put human beings at the top of the quote unquote food chain in the first place, is that we recognized that our mortality was something that we had to in some ways transcend. And then we started writing things down, and then we started passing on stories orally, and then we started forming civilizations, and we started saving our surplus food, and this snowball effect has, you know, taken us from maybe like middle of the pack on the food chain to slowly creeping up, because we've been able to pass those things on. So even though we have all these attempts that we make in our lives to make our lives meaningful and purposeful, and I'm of the school of existential thought that things are either meaningless or meaningful. And I think that things are more painfully meaningful. I think that everything is so painfully meaningful that it's just like easier to try to believe that it's not as it's like,
because if you think one thing matters, why wouldn't everything matter in a way? And
if everything matters so much, then like I'm gonna be paralyzed about everything that I do, because if I make this one decision, it's gonna completely change the course of my life. And that's a lot of responsibility, and it takes courage and bravery.
100%, yeah, to get into that fight mode instead of the flight,
yeah,
or the freeze,
or to find other strategies, like finding ways of being mindful of maybe not relying so much on that fight or flight, but finding ways of making meaning out of life, and finding ways of grounding some of those more base instincts, and using the big fat frontal lobes of our brain that we do have.
Yeah, and it's what I think is strange too is like, I guess what that is sometimes is you want to make an impact across a wider number of people. Therefore, maybe making more of a legacy. You helped more people.
Right.
Maybe like what I think sometimes, this is a weird theory, but what I think is the reason why it might be programmed in for you to want something is like, if you do provide a huge benefit for all these people for years to come, then there should be some kind of like feeling of goodness in that, you know, like, look what I did. Like if without it, because everyone's going to make an impact in a way, like I remember my grandfather still, of course, you know, he's long gone, all my grandparents. And, but you know, if you want to make that past your kin kind of, and you know, your friends of friends and stuff, your network, there almost needs to be some kind of reason to strive for that. Right. You know? Yeah. But I don't know if that's why or not, but you know, I feel it too. I'm like, I want to be doing things that make the generations going forward like better. And
I'll be crass in some ways in saying that is not an entirely selfless endeavor, but that it's not entirely selfish as well.
Yeah.
That there's this part of me that has a will to power, that has a will to want to make what I am the most that it can be, to self-actualize.
Yeah.
but recognizing that I am not self-made and that the process of self-actualization requires that other people also, build me up and make me strong and support me.
Yeah.
And then once I'm in a place of power, then I can be that person to support others. So it's not being collectivist or individualist, it's being both. And that is really difficult for a lot of people to navigate.
Yeah, this is this age of the sign of our times. I feel like this is the biggest conversation that we're going to be having for probably the next few decades is like trying to bring people out of that polarity and into like this nuanced, you're everything. You're all the things.
You're multi-dimensional.
And like maybe your legacy, maybe you're not Conor McGregor, with this huge fucking legacy that he's going to go down in the MMA history books for all of time. Maybe you're Conor McGregor's father. Right. Who was able to love and provide the kind of environment that created the Conor McGregor. And sometimes that's like without recognizing that you miss out on maybe a meaningfulness that is there for you in life.
Yeah. And I think it's ironic in some ways because when you do study a lot of like the quote unquote great thinkers of history, you recognize that they were not great thinkers in their time. They weren't really acknowledged for their great thoughts until they had already passed away and other people came back and revisited their work. Right? People hated Socrates because he just went around telling everyone that they were wrong. Like that's an oversimplification, but now he's the most revered philosopher of all time. You can't look at a philosophy 101 book or course without his name popping up every 2 seconds. Friedrich Nietzsche was another person who was really controversial in the way that he approached a lot of his ideas, and he was a product of his time in a lot of ways. But he would go on to influence so many other people past his death that he would never himself be able to see the results of. I wonder how some of those folks would have, if they were cognizant and alert to see the impact that they had, that they didn't know that they were having in their lifetime. And that's the kind of faith or belief that I think that makes life meaningful. It's like, I don't know the kind of impact that I'll have. I may not even see the fruits of my labor, but all I can do is sow the seeds.
That's huge. Is because like then you decide the mission.
Right.
That's the most important thing about that is like you're not really doing it for the actual legacy. Like if you're like, oh God, I have to be remembered for something. Right. Like that'll just drive you fucking straight off a cliff. It's like, what do you actually want to be? What do you want your legacy to be? Right. And then let the chips fall where they may.
Right. And that I talk about things like theoretically, like that's how we in science or whatever, like go about explaining it. Most people aren't actually thinking that over in their head. That's the process that we're trying to explain. Like that people aren't probably actually consciously going, I need to create a legacy, but maybe there's something subconscious in them that's saying like, I bet if you created a legacy, you could be immortal somehow. Like,
just real quick, I don't know if you know this, but
you should probably figure this out. But so yeah, it's all analogy. It's fun to play with a lot of these ideas, and you spend too much time in a psychology department, and you'll dig up some crazy stuff.
Yeah, psychology is pretty new as far as the sciences go still, right?
Yeah.
And so like there's a lot to explore there, and there's a lot that I think it's going to be pretty wild as it goes forward.
Yeah,
what do you feel like is how do you tap into like that, what is you when you're making that legacy for yourself, or you're deciding like what you want to do, move forward? Is there something you mentioned, I might have twisted around, but like some kind of faith in that, and like how do you trust yourself to know that like this is the path for me and not any other path?
There's some things that kind of feel right. And that is a super subjective and not a very, not a very satisfying. We were talking earlier about, how one of my principles is, authenticity. And so part of my story was also kind of experiencing a career death of track and field, and having that have been one of the things that I got huge value of. But I knew that my track and field career was ending when my college career ended. So I was mourning the death of my track career while I was still running track. And had an opportunity to look at psychology and say, how do I marry my experience of track and field with this thing of psychology? And that led me down performance and sports psychology and health psychology and exploring all of these different avenues. And I found a way to make sense of it. And once I did that, that felt right. and then I can continue to build on that. And if I can continue to build on that within myself, then maybe what I've built on within me can transcend me. So I feel like there's any number of directions that a person could go. And at some point, one has to take something of a leap of faith that the direction that you're on is one worth taking, and be willing to course correct when necessary, but also know that you don't have to have the answer to what your journey needs to look like. You just need to experience the journey.
It only looks like your journey in rear view.
Yeah, in
you know
retrospect.
What I mean? You're like, oh yeah, this is my journey.
Yep.
You know, when you're living it, you're just kind of unbelievably, I mean, it's great when you feel that stronger sense of drive and like, oh, this is, what you want in every moment, but sometimes you are taking more of those leaps of faith, and that's like, what's the fun of it?
Yeah, and sometimes you know what you want, but you don't know what that looks like.
Exactly. Yeah.
I might feel hungry, but I don't really know what I want to eat.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, exactly. You have to play with it in your mind. You're like, I can do this. I could do that.
Right.
And maybe you get a hot dog and it doesn't sit so well with you.
Right.
But guess what? You get another appetite.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
Don't worry. You're going to get hungry.
You're not going to
again.
get the hot dog next time. And like just the learning of that lesson was worth not making making the decision.
Absolutely.
Whereas like past you could have just been like sitting there still like hot dog.
I'm just gonna fast.
Salad, hot dog. Oh fuck.
Fasting
might be
for
nice.
3 weeks on accident because you can't decide what to eat.
Pull a Tim Sheaf, just like not knowing what you want to eat.
But I know that if I compared myself now and the vision and the clarity that I have in terms of what I want to myself 5 years ago, and then Julian 5 years before that, and so on and so forth, that there's a thread of consistency that ties it all together, but that it's still radically different.
Yeah.
In terms of how I want to go about manifesting it. And I can imagine that myself 5 years from now, there will still be that thread of consistency, but that it will have evolved. It will have changed, and I will have changed with it.
100%. Change. It's scary stuff. It's good stuff.
And I like being scared. That's why I do parkour.
Yeah, me too, man. Yeah, do you take your training like outside into like hide stuff? And do you really like to get into that side of it yet? Or not to encourage you to do so, but I'm just curious because if we share these kinds of same traits, I'm like, you're in for it. Basically, I'm like, let you know the road ends at death drops and whatever sometimes.
and descents, yeah. I think I might have missed the descent trend.
Hey.
I think I get my fix still from being at height and checking out a weird, like a pre. Like I am not yet to the stage where moving outside of the gym is necessary for me to get to that. And then there's always the voice in my head that says, do you really know? Do you really need to be able to do descents in order to like do a speed course?
The descent thing is so strange. The descent thing is just out of nowhere. It's such a sendy word.
Yeah.
I actually really like it. And we've been talking about, I used to think 8-foot bar precision. I remember I could think back when I was like, man, that is insane.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll ever be able to do that. Like an 8-foot bar precision at 8 feet high off the ground.
Yeah.
And to be where I'm at now and standing and like looking at that kind of jump and just being like, I'm just like, that,
right.
That's the power of change and embracing that change and not, being afraid of it. But, what was I going to say? Oh, you just reminded me, like, I had this idea for a company that I like might be doing is Send is the name, like Sender. And it's like, it's for this idea of where you ascend up things, you descend down things, like the depths of your darkest fears or whatever, and like challenges or the ascent, but then eventually the goal is that transcension of either of those things and become bigger than what you're doing.
You transcend it.
Transcend it.
Oh my gosh.
Transcend
it.
it.
That's good. That's good. I actually really like that.
So I'm hopefully going to be launching something along those lines sooner than later.
That'd be neat.
I really wish I didn't say anything about it actually.
Oh no.
Now but I'm glad I did. I'm glad I did because now I gotta fucking back that shit up.
You spoke it. You spoke it now.
Spoke it, baby.
Hey, if you're listening to this, Brandon Douglas just gave you a great idea. You better steal it. Better steal it
I
right
gotta
now.
get that trademark right now.
I gotta go get it now.
No, file for it right now.
Oh man, but, yeah, I don't think I'll be doing descents anytime soon. Of course, I say that, and the first thing they do is put a descent into a speed course, and it throws off my mental, and everything's wrong. But
I think you'd be surprised how easy they are.
yeah, I think there's a lot of things that's the case.
Yeah, exactly, right?
That they're hard until they're not, and then it makes complete sense. But yeah, I'm always like, is this something that's going to help me? Like I've looked at tricking, I've looked at like doing all kinds of cool flips and stuff, and I'm like, that looks cool. How is that going to help me? Be good at this speed thing? How do I run faster?
Yeah.
Like if I can stride it, then do I really need to know how to Kong? Like,
yeah, right. Yeah, you'd be surprised. Yeah, sometimes the speed courses and stuff, it's weird because they fluctuate with the times. Like, all right, descents are a thing now, so now everyone needs to learn how to do that. But yeah, I'm wondering what the through lines are for what that thread's going to look like in speed courses in a decade or two. And like, what do you think for people out there? What has worked for you? I think we could both share some tips even on like how to prepare yourself for competition and doing well. Yeah. In a parkour speed comp at least. Yeah.
What has helped for me, what allowed me to compete at the level that I did with so little experience and being so naive and being new to the culture, new to everything, was knowing what my strengths were and being willing to play by them. Because you'll see other people run the same course and they'll do it their way and they'll have very specific hand placement, foot placement, and technique. And I am thinking to myself, how much of this course can I stride? Because I know that's my strength.
Yeah.
Right? So someone might go in for like a cool dive Kong, and if I tried to do the same thing, I'd have a bloody nose. It would not be good. There would be issues, right? I knew what my strengths were, and I was willing to play by them. And then I can go back to the drawing board later and, take care of my areas for growths and weaknesses, as they become aware to me. But
some people get caught up in like, oh, what's it going to look like when I run it? Yeah. What's the move I'm going to do? And it's like, well, how fast are you going to do it? Because that's the point now. I
gave up on trying to be pretty at parkour. I will be ugly at parkour, but I hope I'll still be fast. So if that's the advice to give, is you have strengths. You have things right now that you are better at than others. And if you're looking at what it looks like to just jump in and to participate, it's be knowledgeable of those strengths and be willing to use them. Don't be unapologetic about the way that you do the things that you're good at.
100%. Yeah, I think that's definitely part of what worked for me. I was like, I can send. I was like, I'm willing to ragdoll myself more than some of these guys, so I'll do it. And you can see that in the whatever the NAPC, like what is it called? The infamous one. Yeah. I eat shit on the first course. Like as I'm hitting the finish line, I fall off because I'm just like willing to be a little bit out of control.
I think they edited that out. I think they cut it off.
They cut me as I was like falling to the. Luckily, I fell into the foam pit. That was a little bit unnatural. Like we don't do that anymore in competition. Like it just swiping your hand at something just doesn't really make sense for.
Got lasers now.
That's like a way better stuff. But yeah, like. I think that's huge. Yeah, it's like don't be apologetic about it. That's something that you have to get out of your own way. That imposter syndrome. That's something that's very real. But
what would your piece of advice be?
One of the things that really worked for me was, at least initially, was have fun. Like it's important that as I got better and I started to get like, all right, I actually could see myself winning. Then it changed a little bit. Because I knew that like, all right, if I could put my best run down, that's important to me. Yeah. But initially it was just like, try to have the biggest smile on this whole day. Yeah. And like, try to really enjoy yourself in competition, because I often perform better when I'm stoked, believe it or not, like if I'm excited about what I'm doing. And sometimes I would cheat I would game the system a little bit. I would wear like goofy pants. Like in Tempest Games, there was like this old competition in 2013 that was called the Tempest Games. Right. I wore like these leopard print like harem pants because I just didn't want people to take me seriously.
Interesting.
Even though I was taking it seriously, I kind of like cheated. I was like, no one's gonna take me seriously. I got to like fly under the radar a little bit. Yeah. Take the pressure off myself by like, I'll look ridiculous so I can like apply myself without people being like, what's this guy like? He's trying too hard, Like I'm just like, no, I like take my own pressure off, and I started to really tap into like when I could catalog when I felt like my performance was good. The right amount of nervous, not too nervous, not bored of what's going on.
Physiologically
excited.
Nervousness and excitement are the same emotion.
And I just decided, once I podiumed once, that I should try to podium every time. And I should try to put down my best run.
Right.
And I should always go after the gold, you know. And the only time I regretted anything in competition was when I didn't do that. I like played it safe on this one route, and that was partly because I got injured.
Yeah.
So I didn't really like want to do it the same way anymore. But
well, that's helpful because I've been on some podiums, but never at the national or international level. So
I got in the game when it was real like uncompetitive. So you're facing probably different competition than every year it gets harder and harder.
Yeah. This year's gonna be so much fun because I can just imagine the talent that's gonna be there, and it gets you going. Like I got months before this.
Super hyped for this. Yeah,
really
man.
Hyped.
You're already qualified, or do you have to qualify for NAPC still?
Yeah, I'm not on any like pre-qualifying thing that I know of. There's a few of the regional qualifiers that I'll be visiting. One of them is in Denver, so that's super convenient. I qualified last year in Fort Collins by getting first there. So it's just saying I might visit 2 or 3 of them so that even if I qualify, like I still get some more experience under my belt.
Experience is huge.
Yeah.
That is huge. Yeah, that's another pro tip. It's like if you're not doing classes, you're going to feel that imposter syndrome goes away with exposure. You know,
right.
Like the more you do it, the more you're just like, I feel comfortable here. I don't really give a shit. So just doing it over and over again is huge.
Yeah. Getting used to that adrenaline because even with time trials, classes and courses and like running speed courses, I don't have that same level of adrenaline. And so even if I'm competing at 80, 90, 100%, just like enough that I'm at my maximum capacity, but I'm still in control, then that adrenaline comes in and hits you like a ton of bricks and you are running at 120% and you feel out of control. So that's where the experience comes in. And hopefully I'll qualify one of those and take it from there.
Hell yeah. What about the actual course? Do you run it full through? Few times? Do you like take little beats? Like I'd always set little checkpoints for myself. I'd be like, I have to hit my left foot here.
Yeah.
I only set like 3 to 5 because any more than that, I'm not going to remember. I need to be able to improvise and just tank mode.
Yeah.
But I'm like, okay, that's a beat. I have to hit right foot here. Or I have to hit both feet on that. Or I have to like come in with my feet split this way. And then once I had like things like the rest was just like try harder the whole time. Like just effort.
Determination.
Effort towards the next checkpoint.
Right. I definitely sometimes have beats for things that I absolutely need to execute a certain way. I mean, people who train with me make fun of me sometimes, and I make fun of myself because I will literally have steps and I will say verbally as I'm doing it, right foot, left foot, right, left, right.
Oh, yeah.
Because I want to make sure that I'm optimizing it. But if I'm looking at a course for the first time, I'm breaking it into like a story. There's a beginning, there's a middle, and an end. And I'll look at the beginning and I'll see like, okay, what's the beginning of the story look like? And I'll try to work it through. And I'll say there's a middle. Okay, what is that story? And I'll work it through. And then the end. I don't know if I'll run an entire course because I don't want to gas myself so completely.
That's one thing I would recommend. You don't have to go full sprint, but I would always go through the entire course at least once or twice because I think it's important to feel the entire length of the course. To feel like, am I going to be winded? Should I take a breath here instead of, am I going to like need a breath at some point? Or can I give more effort and actually get away with it? Or just when you start running things without lining them all together, I felt like that was very helpful actually. Like it was every time I would make sure I'd have to go through start to finish. Cause that's the other thing I train myself because you're going to make a mistake. It's like, where am I going to make the mistake? And I need to be on myself to make sure I don't hesitate and like think about it. I'm like, keep going, just go.
Yeah, that I can resonate with. And I think it is helpful. That is good advice to me because I'm coming from, a track and field mindset where I'm like, I'm not going to run the whole full 400 before I run a 400. I'm going to hate myself.
Yeah, I know. It's very different, right?
It's terrible, right?
You know you have the technique already. Where the course, it's like, what does it feel like to transition from the middle of the story to the end of the story? Is, and then I think that can be really helpful.
Well, I'll take that with me and next competition.
I hope it works for you, man.
Absolutely.
Dude, this has been amazing. I think is there
an entire. Was this a dick-free episode?
It was a dick-free episode.
What?
This is the postscript on the episode. We don't have to talk. We can talk about it now if you want. You know.
Oh man. Sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, my friend.
Sometimes it's a big dick in your mouth.
Sometimes
that's like his favorite George Carlin quote. He's like, oh, yeah,
really?
sometimes he was just say, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. He's like, oh yeah, well sometimes it's a big brown dick.
Freud sucking.
Like big? I don't know. I've never seen a cigar that big, but let's
this has been fun. This has been a pleasure.
Yeah, man, me too. I really enjoyed it. I definitely want to have you back on whenever you feel free and are available. And you also have your own podcast. Is there anywhere that we can point listeners to?
Oh man, I have so many different projects. One of them is the Hustle and Thrive podcast, seeing what makes sense for that. If you want to check out a little bit more about me and what I do, you can go to finityfitness.com. That's where I run a lot of my health coaching stuff. That's how I try to make money outside of being a poor, broke college student. So it's FINITY fitness.com. It's me and my team there. It's like, instead of infinity, it's finity. It's like, it's finite. That. Your life is valuable. So let's
I like that. Yeah, man. See, we both have some good names, at least. You know?
But I already trademarked mine.
Well, fuck. I don't have to publish this until, whenever.
No, that's true.
Right now, you're the only person that can fuck my dream up.
Don't worry. I'm not interested in that quite yet.
All right, good.
And then _ Julian Frazier _ on Instagram.
Dope. And I'll put all that in the description too.
Yeah.
I'll make sure that's in there for the links for you guys. Yeah, man. Much pleasure.
Absolutely.
Definitely come back on, and we'll let the gangs play us out again one more time.
Play us out.
I just want to fly. All right, gang. We love you. Thanks for listening.
This has been great.
We'll see you soon.
Yeah, you can love it, you can leave it. Saying nothing without it. Don't let them keep you down.
All right, that was an episode, all right. You know what I'm saying? That was a real episode right there. I don't know, because I'm just recording this ender, and I don't even know exactly how that went because I haven't listened to it yet. But you guys just did, and I'm about to. So hopefully it went real well, and I hope you guys dug it. I'm sure that if you didn't, we'll figure it out. So if you guys can check out the description, make sure you subscribe, do all that shit. You know what's up. You know, because you listened to things like this before, and you just know. And if you don't know, the fuck you doing? You know what I mean? Why even? You're not listening then. You're not even listening. So you just have noise on in the background, which, that's okay. Some people like that some people need it to go to sleep. It is what it is. But chances are you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's all in the description. I really appreciate you guys being here. Much love. We'll see you next week.